Well, hello there. It's Liam from Unique Cars and Parts. I'm with Neil from the Trafalgar Holden Motor Museum. But we're not standing in front of a Holden. We're standing in front of a Buick.
1937 Holden bodied Buick.
A Holden body Buick, and that's why it's here. Now, we've just had a look at this Oldsmobile behind us, the 41/46, and this thing is a little bit smaller, far better looking, and you think a much better car to drive, even though it's older.
This is one of the nicest cars we've got in the museum to drive. It really is a gem. You can get on the bottom of a very steep hill at 30 mile an hour, and she cruises over the top at 60, and you haven't changed a cog.
And judging by that description, Neil, I'm guessing we're not talking about a six-cylinder in this thing.
No, we're talking about a straight eight.
The straight eight.
Straight eight.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they were popular back in the 30s and 40s, weren't they?
Yes, absolutely. And they're not all that uneconomical compared to sixes either. There's only a fairly small piston size, but it really is as smooth as silk to drive.
A bit of a mystery why they dropped with the straight eights and went to the V8s, but I know a little bit about the straight eights, and they were, well, if you've got a BMW six-cylinder, they're a very smooth car, but the straight eights were even smoother. It's a shame that they did away with them, but perhaps it was just the real estate that they took up in the front of the car, and as cars got smaller, the straight eight had to be sacrificed for six cylinders.
I think that's exactly right. You look at the length of the bonnet on that, and when you're sitting inside, it seems to go on forever. But it sort of takes up a fair amount of room.
Not quite like the Oldsmobile that's hiding a little six-cylinder under there. But this comes from an era when I think car designers were, to my thought, at their pinnacle with the Art Deco-ness of it. Is that the right word? Is it the Art Deco? I'm just looking here at this spare wheel and the spare wheel holder, and the thought that went into it is just amazing. It's got so many features, but I do note it's got the split windscreen.
Split windscreen, still using flat glass, but it's interesting in this. We listen to all of these, special locking systems. It's got a magnificent locking system that almost made it bulletproof against people stealing it.
And it's just got a standard key and barrel, doesn't it?
Yeah, but then you've got to have a special trip to trip it, and it's all done from underneath, and it's really very clever design.
So this was before the accountants sort of started to cost cut with their manufacturing of cars. Now, this saw service on Australian roads.
Yes.
Having a Holden body on it, of course.
Holden started bodying back in about 1915 with, there's some argument whether it was a Hotchkiss or can't remember what the other one was, but anyway, and they sort of built up from there. 1928 they bodied 36,000 motor cars, and then when the Depression hit they dropped back to virtually nothing, and that's when General Motors bought them out. And from there on, they only bodied for GM products.
Now, it started as Holden and Frost, and then it became just Holden, didn't it?
Yes, it was Holden and Frost, or it was a Holden and Sons and whatever, and then it became Holden and Frost. They were horse vehicle builders. And they were still upholsterers, canopy makers, whatever. By about 1915, 16, they became Holden Motor bodybuilders, and from there on, that's the majority of their work. And they sold the leather work and whatever off, and concentrated on motor cars.
So back before the war, in 1936, I go to a Buick dealer to buy this, or do I go to a Holden dealer to buy this?
No, you would have gone to a GM8 dealer to buy it. So it was General Motors Holden, and that came about in 1932.
Okay, so I'll go to General Motors Holden and I bring home the car, and my neighbour comes and says, "What are you driving?" And I don't think I'm going to call it a General Motors Holden. I'm going to call it a Buick, aren't I?
Absolutely. They were a Buick, Chevs, whatever, but yes, but it was certainly a General Motors Holden product.
And badged as a Buick?
Badged as a Buick, everything was the same. It's just that the bodywork was done in Australia, because at the time there was tariffs on imported motor cars, And back in about 1917, the government put a tariff on anything that came in with a body on it, just trying to get our local industry to get up and going and get on its feet. And
Well, don't we wish they'd still do the same thing?
funny about governments, isn't it? And, that's another story, and I don't think you'd be able to put any of it to air if you got me started.
Nor me. But okay, so we've come around to the front of the vehicle, and as I mentioned earlier, it's got a sort of a fairly Art Deco feel to it. The spare wheel here is just amazing, the amount of detail that they've gone into the spare wheel carrier, and I guess that maximises the amount of space they've got in the boot, or as the Americans would call the trunk.
The trunk, yeah.
But what's of note is that they've got an exact same one on the other side.
That's what they call a six-wheeler. So you've got two spare wheels, fully kitted out and just ready to be used.
It makes it symmetrical. It looks fantastic, and you think to yourself, it would only be accountants that would have told them to stop doing that.
Absolutely. And when we can't even get a proper spare wheel in a new motor car today, you get some thing that's it's going to get you out of trouble, and that's all it'll do.
A space saver, if you're lucky, or one of those things that fills it up with gunk to get you to the. Yeah, not that great for Australia if you're travelling around.
Certainly not. I object to it, but anyway.
Now this has got club plates, as nearly all of the cars, so they are regularly driven.
Yep.
It's got aftermarket indicators sitting under there, but they haven't fiddled with the bodywork to ruin it. It looks absolutely magnificent. It is an outstanding car, and I think this would have been very popular back in the 30s in Australia.
Oh yes, Buick was sort of the top of the range of General Motors products, and I always say I think Buick's slogan was, "If there's a better car made, Buick will make it."
And if Buicks were the top of the range of the General Motors, what was the bottom?
Oh, Chev people may not like me for saying this, but the Chev was more of your Holden, your everyday Holden car. So I think it was probably the Chev.
And then the Oldsmobile, and then up to the Buick.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you and I agree with that, but it's just hard to know what it was like back. Pre-war. Again, it's almost like a ship's influence on these indicators. Do these indicators work?
Yes, yeah, they're beautiful.
Are they indicators or parking lights?
No, sorry.
Yes, parking lights. I was
Parking
thinking
lights.
there's aftermarket indicators down the bottom, so this would look fantastic at night.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's just. There was nothing about this car that I dislike.
Not quite the Wolseley with the illuminated badge work at the front,
not quite, but no.
But nonetheless. Beautiful. The work in this, it almost looks like a bullet. These headlights, and it looks
Pretty
exceptional.
as a picture, isn't it? It really is.
A remarkable looking vehicle. Well, look, for anyone that wants to come down and check out some absolutely fantastic cars, I would suggest you get down here and have a look at this. Neil is the most gracious of hosts, and have a look at this 37 Buick. It is an outstanding car, and Neil would love to tell you a little bit more about it. Neil, thank you very much for your time. Good on you, mate.
Good on you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.